Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. As we are discussing drowning, and this is the third lecture, and in this I will be explaining what are types of drowning, that is the classification of drowning. The typical drowning. Typical drowning, this depends upon the water medium, that is either it is fresh water in the canals, in the rivers, and then in the salt water, that is the sea. So in both, the process of drowning will be different. And this typical drowning, because of the water, that is called as wet drowning. In this, the water is inhaled in, and this entry of water into the lungs reduces the chances of survival. Once the water is inhaled in and it is replaced by the air which is present in the lungs, and this will cause asphyxia. Now, mechanism of death. Mechanism of death in fresh water and mechanism of death in salt water. Both the processes will be different. In freshwater drowning, the water crosses the alveolar membrane and gets into the circulation. When the person inhales water, water is present in the respiratory passages, and from there it gets absorbed and it enters into circulation. And there is marked hypervolemia, that is increased volume of the blood because of the absorption of water. And the red cells swells up and they burst with the liberation of potassium. Because of hypervolemia, the increase in the volume of the blood because of the absorption of water, and the red cell, they also absorb water, they swells and they burst and liberates potassium. And in less than 2 to 3 minutes, there is 50% increase in the blood volume. And now the heart will be facing anoxia on the one end, there will be hypervolemia and electrolyte imbalance, that is hyperkalemia, increase in the amount of potassium because of the bursting open of the red cells, and hyponatremia, falling sodium. And this anoxia is not only because of the blockage of the respiratory passages with the fluid and the oxygen is not being absorbed, but on the other hand, the red cells are bursting up and they are not carrying oxygen, increased in the volume of the blood. So these are all the insults which the heart is facing. So anoxia and hyperkalemia will lead to ventricular fibrillation. Ventricle start fibrillating, वो कांपना शुरू कर देता है. There is no power of pumping, and death occurs in 4 to 5 minutes. Then what happens in salt water drowning? And this is hypertonic solution, and this hypertonic solution water, when it is inhaled, this will cause loss of fluid from the circulation. From the circulation, the blood will come into the interstitial spaces and there will be marked pulmonary edema. And this, there will be progressive hypovolemia, reduction in the volume of blood, there will be circulatory shock, and eventually there will be cardiac standstill, asystole. Heart will stop beating, asystole, and death occurs in 8 to 12 minutes. Then the atypical drownings. What are atypical drowning? Dry drowning. The word is explaining that though it is drowning, but it is dry. About 20% of the submersion deaths are due to dry drowning. That means 20% of the drownings deaths are not because of the entry of water into the respiratory passages, but it is dry drowning. And what happens is that as soon as the water enters into the nasopharynx or larynx, there is intense laryngeal spasm. Just by the touch of the water to the nasopharynx, there will be intense laryngeal spasm and little or no water will enter into the lungs, and death occurs from asphyxia. And this is the best case of resuscitation, because you can resuscitate such an individual, because there is only laryngeal spasm and you can come over that spasm. Then the immersion syndrome. Immersion syndrome is also vagal inhibition. This is a rare condition and it results from sudden impact of very cold water causing vagal inhibition. And this leads to sudden death from the cardiac arrest. This vagal inhibition can also be by falling or diving into very cold water with feet touching first, or duck diving, that is head going down. So this may also occur due to horizontal fall of the body as per abdomen. Person falls and the abdomen strikes to the surface of the water, resulting into a blow to the abdomen, and this will cause cardiac standstill due to excitation of the vagus nerve. And there is instantaneous loss of consciousness and death occurs in a few minutes. There are no signs of drowning on the body. Then the submersion of unconscious, that means the victim is either epileptic or a patient of ischemic heart disease, and he becomes already unconscious before going into the water. Or he had head injury during the fall into the water. And there may be some other medical condition leading to sudden loss of unconsciousness even before entry into the water. The complete picture of drowning will not be there. That means there will not be ballooning of the lungs, formation of fine froth. So these are typical features of drowning. Then the other type, which is called as near drowning or secondary drowning syndrome. Near drowning or secondary drowning syndrome, this is basically that person that has been survived during drowning process. Person is rescued and later on, because of the infections from the contaminated inhaled water, and victim which has been rescued from water apparently responds to the initial resuscitation and then suddenly deteriorates. That means person first, when has been rescued, he survives, but later on the complications occur and the condition deteriorates. And the anoxia, the exhausted heart, the cerebral edema, they cause the actual damage later on. And there develops the respiratory distress, hypotension, and cardiac arrhythmias. So this is known as near drowning or secondary drowning. That the individual is rescued from drowning, but later on, because of the complication, because of anoxic heart, because of infected water inhaled, the person condition deteriorates and dies. So that's why it is necessary to keep all survivors under observation in the hospital for 24 hours. Because during this period, the person gets pulmonary edema or aspiration pneumonia. pulmonary edema, that is the fluid in the lungs, and aspiration pneumonia. Because of the aspiration of infected water, there is pneumonia. So thank you very much. This is